And we are back. So I've shared with you some of my top books for 2020, and now I'm going to share with you again some of the books that did not quite make it to my must-read list, but I still really enjoyed in this time. It's all about the non-fiction books that I've read. I love books, and I read a lot. This year, I made a personal goal to read one book per week. And in this series, I will share with you some of the books that made quite an impression on me. I hope you enjoy this. So let's start off with the first book, and it's Elon Musk. Elon Musk, Tesla, SpaceX, and the Quest for a Fantastic Future by Ashlee Vance. So it's a biography of Elon Musk. It was published in, I think, 2015. It's a very easy read. It's a fascinating read. Obviously, it's about the life of Elon Musk, and it starts off in a traditional narrative. It's a traditional narrative in a sense that the author made sure to start from Elon's childhood up to the present, right? And even as a child, Elon already had big dreams. He already started dreaming about space, about Mars, and all that. And so it's really not surprising, I suppose, that until now, that's his big dream, right? So it's a good read. It talks about his struggles and triumphs, on where and how he achieved his companies from PayPal to Tesla to SpaceX. Majority of the stories here are during his years with Tesla and SpaceX, and all of it are fascinating. There are stories and accounts from people who love him and hate him. So in that sense, it's a balanced narrative, right? It's a balanced storytelling. And I enjoyed it because, it's fascinating to read about accomplished people and accomplished high overachievers, right? The likes of ganyan na nga, Elon Musk and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. It's fascinating to read about them because you learn a thing or two about their work ethic and their ambition and that drive, that passion, and that belief in themselves that they can do it and they must. So for Elon Musk, I think he has that in common with the other visionaries that we know of, and it's always fascinating to read it. So I enjoyed this one. I read it pretty quickly. I think I read it around first quarter of 2020. So do grab a copy if you're into that. So yeah, fascinating read, definitely. For me, if I can just add, the part that I enjoyed the most, obviously, well, the part that I enjoyed the most is when the story started talking about SpaceX. It sounds so sci-fi, so it's fascinating. It's really quite captivating for me. Tesla and SpaceX are quite something else. We don't have it here in the Philippines, but reading about it is quite fun. So I enjoyed that part. Okay? And next up is Bad Blood. Bad Blood: Secrets and Lies in a Silicon Valley Startup by John Carreyrou. So this book is about the company called Theranos and its CEO, whose name is Elizabeth Holmes, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, CEO is Elizabeth Holmes. So Elizabeth is a bright young lady, very very smart, and she had big dreams as well. Her dream and her vision is to form a company and to invent and to revolutionize the way we do clinical testing. So currently, the way we do clinical tests is very how do you call it? It's a very long process, right? Because of course it's a complicated process. This being about people's health and yeah, this being about people's health, we really have to maintain a strict regulation around it. That's why it's also a long process. Now, Elizabeth Holmes, with her company, she claimed that she has found or she invented a way to shorten that clinical testing process, and by only getting a drop of blood from the patient, and that single drop of blood will be able to detect all different sorts of testing. So dito ko lang din nalaman sa book na to na we're doing a lot of different testings and a lot of different there are a lot of different requirements for each type of testing, and that takes a long process. And more often than not, you need more, samples. You don't get you don't do a test with just a minimum amount of blood. So Elizabeth Holmes wants to change that. Her invention claims that she can do, let's say, 200 plus clinical tests with just a drop of blood. And the amazing thing about it is that it's a fraud. It's not true. All of it was a lie. Her company was valued at $9 billion, and she had numerous investors, and none of these investors are experts in pharmaceuticals and clinical testing, but they were investors. They are investors. And one thing that they saw in Elizabeth Holmes probably is just money. I think it's just greed, really, because they didn't do enough due diligence, and you know and just let her run her company in complete secrecy. So it came to a point wherein Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos went out to market and actually accepted consumers and patients and claimed that they can do the clinical testing with a single drop of blood. And it came to a point wherein they are releasing false results. So if you could just imagine the gravity of that situation, and the seriousness of it all. So mind you, Elizabeth Holmes' case is still open to date. I think her hearing got postponed because of COVID-19. It's pushed to 2021. So this is an open case. So I do encourage you to read it. It's a horrifying read. It's horrifying to me because I couldn't quite believe that a company or somebody would go to would allow something like this to happen when supposedly this should be a very strictly regulated industry, right? And likewise, the investors are just blatantly doing away with standard due diligence, and then even the to the point wherein the patients are receiving false results. That's a serious case. So do read it if you're into that. I think you will learn a thing or two inside it. So yeah, so this one I enjoyed. Next, let's go to a lighter topic. Okay, this one is Untamed by Glennon Doyle. Yeah, and this is a memoir. I think published in 2019 or 2020. Bago lang to. This has been in the bestsellers list for 2020. So 2 words that I describe this book is inspiring and empowering. But because truly that is her story. This is her journey into finding her true self and finally living her true self. So I'm not going to say much more than that, but it's really quite a unique story, and I quite enjoyed reading it because it's such a different perspective. Her life, her family life, her love life, her work life is so unconventional, and in that sense it becomes really inspiring because as a reader you get to see that this type, or even in such an unconventional setup, you can still thrive. And certainly she is thriving, and she's now very happy with her life. So yeah, if you're in the mood for self-discovery and self-empowerment, I think this is the right book. Okay? Next is another memoir, but this time it's all about fashion. So this is Andre Leon Talley. This is his, I think, second memoir. It's called The Chiffon Trenches, and published only this year, if I'm not mistaken. I love this book. I loved his memoir. I love his story. So in this memoir, he talks about his life and his journey and his struggles, and again struggles and triumphs and everything in between, and how he achieved his current his current status in the fashion industry, but generally how he overcame all of those obstacles in his life growing up as a black man, as a black gay man in the US at the time when it wasn't really that accepted, or at the time wherein they are limited to only certain positions at the workplace, and only certain they're very limited in that sense. So his story is very inspiring and again very eye-opening. I mean, for me, I love fashion, so I love reading about his stories about, you know, back in the 70s and 60s, how was the fashion industry back then in the 80s and all that. So he is good friends with some of the fashion giants that we know today. Anna Wintour, the late Karl Lagerfeld, Yves Saint Laurent, and some of the other fashion giants that we don't really hear about as well. So this is a really quite fun read from some. If you love fashion, I think you will enjoy this. Beyond the fashion, Andre Leon Talley's story is really quite inspiring and really quite amazing because even throughout all the obstacles in his way, he managed to break that, you know, the glass ceiling, or maybe I don't think glass ceiling is the right term for it, but you know, he against all odds, he was accepted. He became accepted in the fashion industry, and he became known for his unique skill and talent and vision when it comes to fashion. So now he's one of the, you know, most sought after and listened to fashion authority. So it's really quite fun. I really enjoyed this book, just reading about his life and what the fashion industry looked like in the previous decades. So if you're into fashion, I've said the word fashion so many times now, but yeah, if you're into fashion, you'll enjoy this one. I'm sure of it. And then lastly is more like a history book, and this is Catherine the Great, the biography of Catherine the Great, Portrait of a Woman by Robert K. Massie. So this is a heavy book. And again, I don't have the book anymore because I think somebody borrowed it. I forgot who, and I don't know where it is now, sadly. But I think this is I think about 500, 600 pages book. But I am super happy that I found this book and I got to read about her life. She is truly like the queen, right? She, the empress. We often hear and read about British royals and the Tudors, yun yung mga popular royals, diba? But we also know that Russia, the Russian Empire also is quite the royals. They are quite the different kind of royals, right? And they are essentially one of the first royal families as well. And Catherine the Great was one of the first, and her life story is quite interesting and really quite amazing as well. So in this biography, it is very detailed, and again, it's a standard traditional narrative wherein it starts off when she was a little girl, from a practically unknown minor family and nobility, but then the Russian empress at the time was looking for an eligible girl to marry off her son to, and hence that's Catherine the Great, and then the rest is history, as they call it. But yeah, if you're a history buff, if you're into royal family and how all the nobility was structured and how it all came to be, I think you will like this. I think you will enjoy this. It is a heavy read. It's a heavy book, but I still believe that, you know, it's packed with great information about Russia and about the rest of the royal family. Okay, and I think that wraps up our nonfiction honorable mentions for my 2020. I hope that helped, and somehow, so I hope that helped, and I hope you enjoy it. So do grab a copy of these bosses when in the mood. So thank you for watching. Yan ang boses.